Okay, my bakers, today we won't be baking, we'll be boiling dumplings. So let's get in the kitchen and get started. This is another classic from back home. Hearty dumplings that are super tasty and filling. We never used to make them at home because they were always readily available in shops. But since I moved to the UK, I have not had that luxury. And I kind of forgot all about them. But recently I was craving some meat and pasta, and this is what came to mind. The funny thing is that I had never even attempted making them, and this presented a great opportunity to create another recipe for the channel. As it turns out, they are super easy to make. So here's what we need. For the dough, we'll need some white bread flour, water, salt, and an egg. For the filling, I chose to use a 50-50 mix of ground pork and ground beef. We also have some finely chopped onions, dill, parsley, some minced garlic, salt, pepper, and water to make the filling extra juicy. You can of course use any meat that you like and adjust it to your taste. We'll also need some bay leaves for boiling, some butter for coating them after boiling, and some sour cream to serve them with. Again, any adjustments are up to you. As for the equipment, we'll need a pot for boiling the dumplings, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a cutter. The one I'm using is 65mm or 2.5 inches across. You can use a slightly large one or a slightly smaller one, it's up to you. We'll need a rolling pin to roll the dough nice and thin, and the piping bag would really come in handy, but it's not totally necessary. You could just spoon the filling on, it'll just take slightly longer. Alright, first thing, let's get the filling out of the way. Grab a bowl, pour in the water, add the salt, the pepper, the garlic, the dill, the parsley, and the onions, and then mix it all up. Then add the ground beef and the ground pork and mix it all together. Using your hand will be the best option here. Once the mix is nice and smooth, transfer it to a piping bag and leave it on the side. This recipe makes 50 to 60 dumplings. That is enough for 3 hungry people, or just me and another normal person. I can smash 40 of these by myself without even thinking about it. You could make a whole lot and freeze them too. Triple the recipe, spend a little time, make a bunch of them and freeze them. They can be cooked from frozen, so they make for a super convenient meal. The difference in the time that you will spend between making 50 or 100 won't be that great. But of course, alternatively, you could just make one portion for yourself. Divide the recipe in 3, just make 1/3 of it. It'll take you no time at all. Okay, with the filling done, let's move on to making the dough. Pour the water in a bowl, add the salt and the egg, whisk it all up, and then add the white bread flour, grab your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. It will be slightly stretchy, slightly sticky, but that's normal. It may even feel too soft and too loose, but don't be tempted to add more flour. The gluten is very weak right now, as you can see. We'll cover the dough up now, we'll leave it to rest for 30 minutes, and then we'll give it a fold. This will strengthen the gluten greatly. Even after resting for 30 minutes, you can see the dough has become nice and stretchy. It's already halfway there. So let's give it a fold now. Wet your hands with water, release the dough from the bowl, pick it up in your hands, and then fold the sides down and push them back up into the middle whilst going around in a circle. Just fold it down and push it back up. Once it's become relatively tight, place it back into the bowl, cover it up and leave it to rest for another 30 minutes. If you think that it's too sticky for you, you can place it in the fridge. The cold will stiffen the dough up and make it easier to work with. Okay, the timer is up and the dough is ready, so let's move on to rolling it out. It is still a little bit sticky, so you want to generously dust the dough and the table with flour. You want to roll the dough nice and thin. It should be no more than 1 to 2 millimeters thick. It might get a bit sticky as you roll it, so just dust it with more flour. It will roll out to a surprisingly large size. As you can see, it has almost covered my whole workspace. Okay, once you roll your dough nice and thin, move on to cutting it into little circles. Try to be as efficient with the space as you can. And after cutting, you want to collect the scraps, mush them all together, and then once you finish shaping the first ones, roll out the dough ball that you've made from scraps, and repeat the process until there is no more dough left over. Right, next up, pipe on the filling. You want to add about a 1 teaspoon worth of it on each disc of dough. And of course, if you don't have a piping bag, you will be using a teaspoon. When it comes to piping, you can't just squeeze it on, you have to pinch it off with your fingers. But there's nothing complicated about that. And there's also nothing complicated about shaping them. So here's a close-up look. Basically, you want to fold the dough over the filling to meet the other side, and then pinch the edge together. And you could stop here. Half-moon shaped dumplings are great too. But here's how to make the folded ones. Dip your index finger in some flour, push it into the back of the dumpling, then take the 2 pointy ends and cross them over your index finger and pinch them together. Then pull your finger out, you got a nice little dumpling. To save yourself some time, you can enclose the filling in the dough whilst they're still on the table. And then once you've folded them all over, continue by shaping them. Just be sure to flour your fingers, because as soon as the dough starts sticking to your fingers, you'll run into problems. I pretty much dusted my fingers with flour when shaping each dumpling. Shaping them is super easy once you've done it a few times. The first 20 that I made were pretty ugly, I must say, and I left them on a separate tray on the left here. We'll keep those for later. I'll boil the ones in a large tray now. Those wonky dumplings will give us a good opportunity to test how they freeze. So I'm going to cover them up so they don't get freezer burn, then pop them in the freezer and leave them in there. We'll wait until they're completely frozen, then we'll boil them. But for now, let's cook these beauties. And there are various ways of cooking them. Some people like to make a proper bouillon, whilst others just boil them in water. I like to season the cooking liquid with salt and pepper, a little bit of vinegar, and some bay leaves. I guess the vinegar might sound a little bit weird to you, but trust me, it really works. These things benefit from a bit of acidity. That is why they are mostly served with sour cream. Cooking them could not be easier. It's foolproof. Get your water to a rolling boil, drop them in, wait for them to float to the surface, and from that point, boil them for exactly 3 minutes. Once the timer is up, they're ready. Fish them out of the liquid using a slotted spoon, or strain them off in a colander, or reserve the liquid and eat it with the dumplings. Some people like to eat the dumplings with the boiling liquor, but here's how I like to eat them. Mix in a spoonful of melted butter, and then top them with a good dollop of sour cream, some extra black pepper, and dill. I must say I'm very surprised at how well these turned out. Like I said, I had never even attempted making them, but the taste and the texture turned out perfect for me. It just goes to show how simple a recipe it is. There wasn't much we needed to do, right? We mixed the filling together, then we mixed the dough, we rolled it out, we cut it up, we topped it with the filling, we shaped the dumplings, and then we boiled them. It took less than 2 hours from start to finish, and most of that time was spent waiting for the dough to rest. But we're not finished yet. Let's look at the frozen dumplings now. They've been in the freezer for a few hours, and they have frozen solid. The good thing here is that the cooking process is exactly the same as with the fresh ones. Drop them in the boiling water, wait for them to float to the surface, and then cook them for 3 minutes. That is super convenient. This time I decided to try something different. I drained them in a sieve to get rid of all the liquid, and then I dropped them in a pan with hot oil. I fried them for around 5 minutes, turning them a couple times. This makes them slightly crunchy and charred and slightly more chewy. I do like them like this sometimes. And by the way, you could also deep fry them without even pre-boiling them. Just drop them straight in hot oil. The same 3-minute rule applies. So what do you think of this recipe? Have you ever made dumplings? Let me know down in the comments. For more videos like this one, click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.